All right, well, welcome you guys. Welcome to California Bus's Earth Day program. We're really excited that you could all join us. I know you expect it to be a smaller group today because there's a number of people that are here at the United Motor Coach Association. We're reporting in from the show floor. We've got a beautiful banner, if you can see it behind me, for CBA. We're really representing for CBA at the show. We've got some logos, we've got information about our upcoming program. It's very exciting here. So I'm going to turn off my microphone after we're done, and Chris Riddington will take it away. What we want to do is I just want to welcome everybody, remind you to please mute your phones or your computers, but I recommend you put it on speaker mode so that you can see the images that are coming up and just see the speakers. And just want to thank you again. It is recorded, so we will be sharing this on social media and sharing these particular presentations as time goes on over the next week. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Chris Riddington, who will take you through the agenda, and he will be hosting today's session. So welcome, Chris, and thank you for taking the time to do this.
No, great. Thank you, Vicki. It's glad to be here. Glad everybody could join us here for Earth Day. Some of the things that we do at CBA is seen in California as CARB. So it's great that everybody can take their time out of their day and hit us on April 22nd and zoom in from wherever you're at. One of the things that I want to go over with everybody is the agenda. It's pretty compact, pretty specific. It's really it's informative. It's going over some of the stuff that's happening in California. We're going to hit it with David Kastenbaum here from University of Vermont is going to take us through some of the things that he's doing at erating.org and some of his sustainability in our Golden State. And we're going to have a little testimonial from our one and only famous Jody Merritt. One of the cool things, we'll do some question and answers everybody has there as well. And we have a great MCI, Brent Danielson and Michael McDonald are going to do some a report on electrification and what MCI is doing and their the future of electric in the industry and in California. So kind of with that, the agenda, we're going to start here getting into it. And I want to kind of go over some of the overview of CARB committee and what we do and at the CBA. Mike Waters is on the committee with me, and I see Jim Seaton there. He does a lot of stuff big time in the backwoods of CARB for us. We deal with CARB all of us deal with CARB on a daily basis with our vehicles, but CBA, we do a lot of keeping up with CARB, their legislations, their agendas, what's coming through. How can we as an industry stay on top of that? Then as the committee, we pop that through to the board of directors, and then we keep our membership updated on everything that's happening. And we do a lot of meetings with a gentleman by the name of Tony Brazil at CARB. He's been kind of the person that has been our point man at CARB. He keeps us up to date. We're always doing back and forth talk, keeping them up to date on what's going on with our vehicles. And lately, it's electrification. It's something that when DPF started to come out, we kind of fought that a little bit. It was really hard in the industry, really expensive, and electrification is now the next thing. And we are looking at kind of taking that in, and we do definitely have some hard things we're going to move forward through in the industry, but it's something that we're going to, I guess, take in and move forward with positively. And as we move forward, we're going to fight the things that we all, not fight, but work with the things that we've all done and put out there. We recently put out a survey, and all of us have the same thoughts on CARB and this electrification. We need batteries to go farther. Majority of us know that. We need batteries to charge faster, and we need batteries to not take as much luggage space because our passengers need that space. And we need an infrastructure that can handle all of that for us. So that's one of the things that we're working with CARB with. We're letting him know through our operator surveys and our operator information. Hey, this is what we need from the electrification industry. We want to get on board as soon as we can. We just need this stuff to start coming through, and in the next 10, 15, 20 years. And Tony understands that, and that's kind of what the CARB committee currently is doing for the CBA, is keeping us at the table with CARB and making sure that they understand what our industry does and what it needs, and what it's going to need moving forward. So anybody have any questions of CARB, our CARB committee, or anything like that? I'll be glad to answer them. I know Vicky's going to be checking the chat, so we can get to a question and answer point after we listen to the MCI portion. So I'm going to kick it off over to David Kastenbaum, who can run us through his sustainability of the Golden State. David, you there?
I am here, just had to unmute. And so what I'll do is I'm going to do a screen share. Everyone, apologies in advance for any clunkiness that could occur. We know that does happen on occasion. And we'll start it off from the beginning. Let's see. Can someone confirm? I got a thumbs up from Vicky. That's nice. And so that's Dave Kestenbaum, certification for sustainable transportation. A lot of you know me already in the industry. And today I was asked to just give a little bit of a talk on, for Earth Day, on sustainability and motor coaches in California. And what I thought I might do is just, instead of digging right into the modern context, pay a little respect to Earth Day itself, especially because Earth Day, as a lot of folks might know, has a history that's connected directly to the state of California and oil in the state of California, amongst other things. And I put this picture up here. A lot of people, when they talk about Earth Day, will do sort of that image from space of Earth. And I always think that might be a little bit of a disservice to this message. Every environmental issue is a human issue. And I always look at Earth Day is an idea of, we collectively as society and what we could do to improve our society. So I wanted to make sure that this image today didn't disconnect Earth from people. And moving forward, just history of Earth Day really had its roots and maybe wouldn't have existed without this oil spill that occurred in 1969 in Santa Barbara. And there was this oil spill, it was like the size of the state of Chicago or the city of Chicago. It's just a giant oil spill. And at the time, Santa Barbara was home to a lot of really wealthy Republican donors. And it got the, attention of Nixon, who wasn't really known to be much of an environmentalist, but he came out, and this gained really big national attention at the time. And then there was Senator Gaylord Nelson from Wisconsin, and Gaylord Nelson from Wisconsin was an environmentalist, a Democrat. He teamed up with Pete McCloskey, who at the time was a Republican congressman from San Mateo County. And they together proposed this idea of Earth Day. And they had the first Earth Day in 1970. And this was before the creation of the EPA. It was before the Clean Air Act and the Clean Water Act. And eventually Earth Day grew, gained attention in 1972. And in 1990, 1992, when there was this big Rio Summit on the environment that was attended by George H.W. Bush, it really exploded and became like this largest global, day to celebrate Earth and nature. And it had this roots and the connection back to oil in the state of California itself. And what I want to, back then, when we were talking about oil, folks were really worried about threats of oil spills being one of the biggest environmental impacts from oil. That's really not the concern today. Globally, where people are paying attention to are the carbon impacts and the greenhouse gas impacts of burning oil. And, the message, that I would like to convey here as we lead off, a lot of people, when they think environment, they think green and, oh, polar bears aren't related to me. But to try to see this idea that environmental issues are really human issues. And I think back to human health issues and air quality in California and LA in the 1970s and 80s. And I remember visiting in the 80s LA as a kid. And now when I go back now, it just feels like a profound difference. And that has an impact on human health. And human health has an impact on our economy and jobs. Clean water, same thing. And then when we think about oil and gas and burning that related to climate change, well, climate change threatens crops, human migration, disease, weather instability, and instability links to economic security and physical security as well. So I wanted to just throw those ideas out as background stuff and now just come to California. So California, well, for better or worse, you have a very aggressive programs considered to, in comparison to a lot of parts of the world and in comparison to the US for sure, for reducing greenhouse gas emissions. And you've got these targets in place and, legally, like the targets show that 2020 carbon dioxide levels, they're shooting to basically, to be equal to 1990 levels, around then. But then for 2030, 40% below 1990 levels. And by 2050, a goal of 80% below 1990 levels. To understand how people are going to get there, California's done an analysis of where do our greenhouse gas emissions come from? And none of these numbers are perfect numbers, right? But they're pretty good assumptions. And 40% of all greenhouse gas emissions in California come from transportation, with about 28% of that coming from like light and medium duty passenger transportation and 8% heavy duty vehicles. And probably about half of that is going to come from like private sector motor coaches as well as like public transit. So like heavy duty passenger transportation vehicles. The ways that folks are looking at improving the efficiency, well, or per unit of production or consumption for transportation is basically getting people to travel less. So avoiding trips, modal shifts. And what that means is getting people, instead of taking their cars to a different form of transportation, maybe they're skateboarding, maybe they're biking, they're taking a Lime scooter, or getting on the bus. And what I think the real moral of today's story, as we walk through this in a few minutes, is buses are a really legitimate option that we could defend. The public doesn't necessarily relate buses and green together, but there's a profound connection and a really powerful story to tell as buses as being part of the solution, and especially them not being part of the problem. Having more efficient vehicles and new technologies. And electrification, if we can get that up to scale and you get rid of batteries, better charging stations, and the energy is coming from clean green sources, well, that's certainly one way to get there as well. Especially if those fuels are carbon neutral or carbon negative, and they're low carbon and energy efficient. And ways to improve efficiency is reducing congestion on the road. I mean, you all know from running bus and motor coach companies, your vehicles get better fuel economy when they're driving down the road versus being stuck in stop and go traffic, right? So when you have less congestion on the road, your vehicles and your whole system's moving more efficiently. You might have the same number of vehicles on the road, but without that congestion, if you got good systems, you might boost your efficiency by 10, 15, 20%. And then, through consumer and driver education programs of teaching people, what is this all about? And then how do we actually burn less fuel, save money, and reduce our carbon footprint? California, as I said before, you've got these aggressive goals, including, those SB 32's goal of reducing emissions 40% below 1990 levels by 2030. You've got SB 350 and 100, where it says 60% of all electricity from renewable sources by 2030 and 100% carbon-free sources by 2045. That basically means probably shifting away from like coal-burning power plants, if you still get electricity from those, or diesel-burning power plants, and moving towards wind, solar, electric, and some other technologies that are out there. And there's some cool stuff going on with carbon capture. So maybe there will be a way to balance that out in the future. And you've also got a rule, sustainable transportation planning, SB 375. Now, taking yourself out of ourselves out of California, you've also got stuff happening nationally and internationally. And since this is Earth Day and it's global, I figured I'd give a shout out to what's happening on that, larger scale. And you've got something called the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change that Paris Accord, as controversial as that is in a lot of circles. You've got 190 countries that have made commitments. We know some put it on paper and may not follow through, but we also know other groups are really working hard at following through, and Europe's probably leading the charge on implementing and putting their plans into action. Just yesterday, President Biden discussed having a 50% reduction from 2005 levels of carbon in our country by 2030. And generally, you see movement across the globe of looking at that 80 to 100% reduction by 2050 to have a carbon neutral system. Now, when I'm thinking about that, and I'm thinking about what's the role of transportation companies and what's the role of motor coach companies within this big equation, I was thinking, how is this going to work in California? And so those of you who have spoke with me before, you've probably heard me say this. And when I'm thinking about, what's the real utility or value you get out of transportation, it's the bill for passenger transportation. It's your ability to move a butt from point A to point B in person, right? And get them from one place to another. And that's essentially the same. That's like you're moving people a mile or 2 miles or 10 miles at a time. And if you want an efficient transportation system, you need to move people efficiently. And so one metric that's really helpful for understanding the carbon footprint of moving people is how many grams per CO2 are you emitting per passenger mile? And if you have one person in a car that gets 25 miles a gallon, right? Well, you're probably not moving them that efficiently. You're moving them about 274 grams of CO2 per passenger mile. And actually, I'm going to move up here. I'm sorry. I didn't mean 274. I pulled that from another source. You're moving them about 492 grams of CO2 per passenger mile. If you got a bunch of people in a similar car, you're moving them at 164. An electric vehicle, a single occupancy person in California, these are CARB numbers, it's about 123 grams of CO2 per passenger mile. And if you go down this chart here, you can see different categories. But funny enough, motor coaches aren't listed here. You've got an estimate for 80% occupied transit buses. That doesn't happen a ton. In some areas of the country, you get that a lot, but on average, you probably don't. And then you've got estimates here for 20% full, whether you're using diesel or electric, and passenger rail. But buses and motor coaches, it's a big industry, but it's relatively small compared to these folks. And you've never broken these numbers out individually in the state of California. So in trying to figure that out, wound up doing some math and looking at the average single occupancy vehicle in California in 2017. And that was 411 before you take into consideration some other factors. It was really closer to that 490 in the previous slide. In the US, ground transportation, we move people at an average of 274 grams of CO2 per passenger mile. And sorry if I'm losing folks with numbers and math here. We can get back to any of this stuff if you'd like. But looking at ABA numbers, when you think about it, you probably have an average of around 40 people on your bus at any moment. You got 55 seats, but it's rarely that you're 100% full all the time. But you're probably not running empty buses. On average, buses and motor coaches, you have around 40 people. ABA has done the math on this, and with the number of people you have in the bus and the average MPG. So let's say your average MPG is about 6 miles a gallon. You multiply your 40 times 6, you get your passenger miles per gallon of fuel. Now, if you actually do some math on that and you calculate for how much grams of CO2 are in each gallon of fuel, well, using the ABA numbers for average passenger miles per gallon, you emit about 38 grams of CO2 for each gallon, for each passenger miles of fuel. Now, if we want to be more specific on that and actually make comparisons in California to that chart that I put up previously, is that previous chart actually used a slightly different, what we call emissions factor. And it actually didn't just talk about the fuel that was being burned out of the tailpipe. It also included something called life cycle cost or downstream costs. And that's basically how much does it cost to, like, how much carbon do you put in the atmosphere extracting the fuel, transporting the fuel, storing the fuel, getting into your tanks. And when you take that into consideration plus what's burned, you have an emission factor of, okay, this is the number, nobody has to remember it, right? But it's like 12,928 grams of CO2 per passenger mile. Or about 51 grams of, down here, 51 grams of CO2 equivalent or greenhouse gases that are released into the atmosphere for every passenger mile traveled in a motor coach. So if motor coaches came up here on this chart, you are doing better than every single category, except for an 80% full electrified commuter vehicle, transit bus, or a renewable diesel passenger rail. What I want to get to on this is when we compare how efficiently buses and motor coaches in California are moving people from point A to point B compared to the average efficiency of your system, which is probably somewhere between 274 and 411, where those single occupancy vehicles were, or actually, yeah, it's probably somewhere between 492 if we want to look at these numbers, and and the transit vehicles. So you're probably around 300 grams of CO2. You're at 51. You're more than 50% more efficient than the system is today for moving a person from point A to point B. On average, you're closer to around 70 or 80% more efficient than our system is as a whole in the US. And every time you take a step to improve your fuel efficiency, you're reducing wear and tear on your vehicle, you're saving money, right? Every time, for your company, but you're also reducing your greenhouse gas emissions and improving that efficiency. And the more you run fuller buses, the more you're improving that efficiency as well. And so this big take-home message that I think is important is, if we're talking about responsible consumption of fuel, or we're not worried about oil spills, well, you've got a 2050 solution today in the bus and motor coach sector with what you're doing, with room for growth and improvement. And so I was thinking, when I was talking to Vicky and Chris in previous weeks, well, if we're really looking at the straight bottom line here, I think you in the bus and motor coach industry and CBA, you've got a very good case to make saying, hey, we're making an efficient use of oil, and we're doing better right now if you allow us to do what we're doing than if, than these other people are doing with switches. Motor coaches are affordable and accessible to the most vulnerable and often most marginalized groups. And those are the people that are often affected the most by climate change. You have access in rural areas and urban settings, make it an equitable form of transportation. And if you have a chance on this Earth Day, I would say use Earth Day as an opportunity to let your staff, clients, potential clients, and the public know you're here, you're part of the solution, not part of the problem necessarily, and work to build momentum to that and think of creative ideas to do more. If people are looking and to take into consideration environmental attributes or how friendly is an environmentally friendly is a form of transportation for moving person from one place to another, I think you have a more powerful story than most sectors out there and most technologies, and it's affordable and accessible. And if one day there is that full switch to electricity and electricity is there, electric vehicle technology exists, you'll still be cleaner and greener than the competition, as long as the momentum keeps up and you're not lagging behind. So I think I'm gonna stop sharing my screen now. And Vicky and Chris, if you wanted me to do one of the exercises we did last time by talking to an operator and actually trying to tease out those numbers, we can. But if we also just would like to move on, we can do that as well. So I'm in your hands, just let me know.
Okay, thank you, David. Anybody
Yep.
have any questions for David at this point in time? Well, I know we have Jody Merritt on, and maybe David, you and her can talk about the erating.org and what you two have worked together on, and tease out and talk about some of those numbers where erating.org takes an organization, a bus company, and gets those numbers down to a science.
Sure.
So how long ago did we actually start the process? Was it 2012 or 2013? I can't remember.
I was right around there, and you were one of the first companies I got to visit in person. You were the pilot group for me to show up and do work on site. That was a lot of fun. But it was somewhere around 2012 or 13.
Okay. And then you came back out and visited us, I believe in 18 or 19, and you did training with our then drivers. And we implemented a program then, and I couldn't find the numbers from that, and so much has changed in the last year that I wanted to share with you the numbers we currently have. So through COVID, we all slimmed down staff and whatnot, and so kind of watching our idling and our miles per gallon and all that kind of went by the wayside for 2020. But long about December, I started looking at it again because I noticed my people were really idling. And so I started running numbers, and December 31st, 2020, for 30 days, our average fleet average for miles per gallon was 6.78. Not good with a new fleet, right? And our idle time had crept up to 31.7, which was really, really high because I know we got our stuff down below 20 in 19 when we were doing this. And then March 31st, 2021 numbers, so every month I look at every single driver, I send them a spreadsheet of you've improved this much on this, you've improved this much on that. Some of our drivers in that 3-month period have actually reduced their idle time by 20. The highest one was she reduced her idle time by 26%.
Wow.
How crazy is that? That's awesome, right? So our fleet average now at the end of March, and 3 months of me being on them constantly about idling and all that stuff, our fleet average is 7.8 miles per gallon. And our fleet average idle time, including cleaners, is 10.9. So just for me concentrating on it for the last 90 days, we've been able to reduce it by over 21% company-wide, which I thought was absolutely phenomenal. So I think in 19, our program consisted of, if they saved me fuel money, I would give them the money instead of the fuel man. Right now, it's just all about cutting costs. A few other issues, right? So there's no fuel incentive for them now, except for Jody doesn't have to yell at them. And get on them constantly. But they're doing phenomenal. And it's really just constantly being on them, reminding them, if you notice they are idling, ask why. Why are you idling at 1 a.m.? Well, it was 20 degrees out. Okay, I'll give you that one. So making more of a conversation of it and whatnot. I've just seen a lot of improvement in the last 90 days.
That's neat to see. I just did the math. In the last 90 days, you improved your fuel efficiency by about 15%. And when I think about improving fuel efficiency by 15% is I imagine what does it look like if an operator reduces their fuel cost by 15%? And then when I think about idle time, it's most of your savings isn't just from the fuel saved. It's from wear and tear on your equipment, especially with the newer equipment. You're probably free. You know, I see Robert Hitz on here. We've got some other folks that could probably speak more to it. But an hour, you know, I was always told an hour of engine runtime in idle is about the equivalent of going down the road 60 miles. And, you know, I'm thinking hours of service on a diesel engine. Every time you save that, you save big time. But if I go back, Jody, back to 2012, I'm remembering your average idle time was somewhere around 42%. And we did in-person and online trainings for your drivers where we started with roundtable discussions, and we talked about reducing idle is about never idling. So when you're in Death Valley, you better leave that vehicle on. When, you know, you can't see and you need to defrost your windshield, you better leave that on. But there's ways to be nuanced and surgical about it and use common sense and get buy-in. And we put up posters around the shop. There were weekly tracking things. There were the pins for the drivers, a little hokey to elevate the conversation. And between that and eco drivers and some other stuff, you reported to me 6 months later, a 10.3% improvement in fuel efficiency across the board. And, you know, this reduced hours of service that was profound. And so that was pretty rewarding. And what it told me was like, when you work the program, it works for you. But if you don't work the program, it probably won't do anything. It's like a lot of things in life. But then I don't know if you can, you know, Vicky and Chris set us up a little bit for like the, you know, like what was it like to work together for E-rating and, you know, for, you know, the trainings and those programs. But another part of what we were doing with you was you have helping you calculate those numbers. So what is your passenger miles per gallon? What is your giving certification labels? One thing I've never asked you, and I think it might be a little dangerous in a forum like this, but I'll just go for it, is have you ever used that and the participation of we tracked it, we have these environmental programs as part of a sales pitch to clients? Because I know other operators have and have been able to use that to land corporate clients.
Not to that degree, we have
Yeah.
not. We always talk about how green we are and that we're green certified, and all of our drivers are. And every contract I can get my hands on, I make sure I mention those lovely words, especially for the state of California. They like hearing that green. So I do it that way. But, you know, I kind of want a copy of your slides because I'd like to put a whole thing together for my clients that I could maybe promote that way. Definitely.
Jody, did you do with David the erating.org vehicle stickers?
Yes.
David, can you explain a little bit of that to the membership on how that works?
Sure. I mean, essentially what we do is we help you calculate that carbon footprint per passenger mile. It's a little bit, we try not to make it so tricky it's going to take any company more than 4 hours to do, because we're all limited for time. Some companies we could just put this together right away. If you track your passenger loads, your deadhead miles, your live miles, your average MPG, you just give us that information. We'll turn it around within like a half hour or an hour. Now, if you don't, it gets a little trickier and we need to do like a little sampling methodology of like, okay, let's pull a few random trips. Let's try to calculate this number. So it's not throwing numbers at, you know, throwing darts at a dartboard to get a number, but we'll work with people to do it. But all we really need is the amount of fuel you consume for a year, amount of miles driven. We calculate your average passenger load. We try to get a calculus for like your deadhead miles. And from there, we get your PG, and then you get a fleet list. And we talk to you about, are you doing driver trainings, education programs, anything neat? And you get a label. But the label basically, you know, we designed it for any form of transportation. We work mostly, obviously, with bus and motor coach folks. But most people, as long as you're not running empty buses, you know, you're running 50 to 80% more efficiently than our system is as a whole. So and in California, for better or for worse for the operators, you have the new emissions technology on the vehicles. So most of the it's a good way to qualify. And that's how you get that label. And then with that, we try to give people like the turnkey marketing tools of, here are some posters, print ads, press releases to send out to the public so you can communicate that 2050 message today, 2050 message out to everybody that you want to, as well as like the being an equitable and affordable form of green transportation as well. So that's what we do. And I've always come at this, I'm an environmental guy. And my thing is, I used to do ecotourism work, and I was thinking there was so much hypocrisy in it, where most of the environmental footprint happened when a person traveled from one point to another. I was like, how do I start doing work with transportation? How do you get green transportation for tourists? And we started something small here in Vermont, and it was green travel in the Green Mountain State. And it was this idea of, let's get people in this efficient form of transportation. And all of a sudden, next thing you know, I'm like this bus guy in some sort of way. And working with the bus industry. But for me, it's like, how do I get companies to engage to tell their story? And then how do we and for me, it's like, give you tools to increase revenue, advertising, give you tools to decrease costs, training and efficiency programs. And if you could do that, well, you get greener, but then hopefully you attract more people to jump into your cause. So for me, this is like sort of like a bit of acrobatics for how to, as an environmentalist, do I connect with an industry and operators who, may or may not have environmental values, but when you run a business, you're not running a mission-driven not-for-profit. You gotta pay the bills, put food on the table, and move people and provide people with employment. So there's not a lot of luxury to do as much feel-good stuff as we all like to do all the time. So
that's one thing I like about the vehicle erating.org placard or sticker you get to put on your vehicle, is it gives you the marketing to show how green you are, and then hopefully put some green in your pocket. So it's definitely something that once we come out of COVID-19, that it could be very good for to have your vehicles have this rating, specifically in California. But David, we had a question come in from Jenny Orr on the manufacturing process. And are any of those numbers taking into consideration the carbon footprint of creating the vehicle? And do you have any of those information on that or insight?
I've never done that I've never done a life cycle cost assessment for the different manufacturers. That would be interesting to do. And some of the manufacturers may have done that themselves.
Yeah, maybe MCI could tune in on that. If you guys have any info during your presentation for Jenny, that'd be great. Or now.
I'm not talking about just buses. I'm talking about what it takes to create an electric vehicle versus what it takes to create a gas vehicle, not just the fuel, but the creation of the vehicle, the batteries and all those components, because that's going to change the values. It's not just the miles, it's the creation of them.
Yeah, good question. The carbon footprint of creating batteries compared to a diesel engine, you're saying?
Yeah, there's really good research coming in from different parts of the globe, and the story basically is that given all things into consideration, life cycle costs, as long as you're running the vehicle for a year or two, you pretty much, the electric vehicle is going to be much greener overall, and it's not a really it's not that much more energy intensive to go production of electric vehicles when you take into consideration what it takes to run the vehicles. I can't quote it off the top of my head, but I read a really good article about 3 months ago addressing that exact point. And they did all sorts of analyses of when you get that payback. If you're looking at the net, right? If you're really looking at the net positive, when you get that payback back, and electric is the clear winner for sure. But I mean, with buses, like you said, like we know, you don't get the battery storage to go really long distances, and they're so big, you're going to lose luggage bays. It's not the most feasible thing right now for your industry at the moment.
Not yet.
No.
So David, I appreciate your presentation and giving us an insight into all the good stuff that buses are doing, and basically we're clean till 2050 and we're just getting cleaner. So next thing I wanted to kind of go over a little bit more in depth while MCI, you're about 15 minutes out. We sent out a CBA survey, and it went over some electrification questions. And I just kind of wanted to go over some of those answers that our membership had given and the results. 60% of our respondents, and this was a question that we wanted to ask based on CARB, Tony Brazil asking how many of our operators run 250 or more miles. And with our survey, it looks like over 60% of our operators on the survey operate their buses more than 250 miles per day. We had one operator that operates his fleet more than 450 miles per day, and we had one operator that operates between 100 and 150 miles per day. But a majority of our operators are operating over 250 miles per day, which then throws us into that's something that we're going to need from the electrification industry on our distances the buses can go. One of the things that we asked our membership was what was their idea of how fast a bus should charge that would be good for them, and 80% of our respondents said they need that bus to charge in 2 hours or less. One respondent had said that they wanted that bus 5 to 6 hours was fine for them, but the majority 0 to 2 hours was what they needed that bus for their operation. Some of the comments came back where they were embracing it, electrification, but they wanted some of their concerns, which we talked about in the past, were the distance of the batteries, the charging infrastructure for our drivers and vehicles be able to charge from wherever they're at. If they're in the middle of a long tour or they're in a city, we need to have the infrastructure there. The charging time, again, we as an industry, our survey said we'd like that to happen under 2 hours. Battery space was another big concern on the survey. A lot of people had said that they really need that space, and they're concerned with the batteries taking up so much space that it would interfere into their business and their customers. So that was definitely a survey that came through on all of our respondents. And the cost of the vehicles, obviously, I'm sure MCI will go into some of that into their presentation, but the cost is something that right now we're seeing as a implication getting in. Right now we're paying $500,000 per bus, and I think the current electrification, MCI again can go into more detail, but I think that's upwards of $1 million. So that's one of our industries getting into electrification cost basis. So I appreciate everybody that did send in their surveys. It was some helpful information. I know Mike and I will dig into the information more. We'll be able to use that information and talk with Tony Brazil about our industry and making sure our industry that we're going to embrace electrification, but we can't get pushed into something that is not cost feasible and doesn't fit into our businesses. So that survey, then we're going to push out that to Tony, which is very important for him. So I think right now we're in the agenda of we can do some more questions and answers if anybody has any, or we can, if MCI, if you're ready, we can jump into your section if you'd like.
Sure, I'm ready to go anytime you want, but if you want to do some questions and discussion before I begin, that's fine too.
Okay. I think if you guys are ready, we'll just go ahead and hit it off and have you guys take control. So I'll turn it over to Michael McDonald at MCI, and I appreciate that. He's going to take it over from here.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Chris. I'm just going to get my screen all shared here. Hope everybody can see my desktop there and hear me all right. So again, thank you so much for having us here. Happy Earth Day, everybody. Again, my name is Mike McDonald, and I am the operations manager with the Vehicle Innovation Center in Anniston, Alabama, although I am located in Canada. The VIC, as we call it, sort of serves as a hub for R&D, as well as interfacing with our customers and sort of educating them on the types of technology that we use and that we're constantly implementing on our buses and coaches. So there's a couple different ways that we could approach this kind of topic. Obviously, electrification is very broad. There's so many different topics and there's so little time to do it. So I'm going to touch a little bit on California specifically. I'll talk about the I guess the technological feat of doing a battery electric coach, as well as talking about infrastructure. How do you charge the thing? So let's start with California and the road to zero emission. And Dave, you did a great job introducing us to some of the nitty gritty numbers behind it. I'll add a couple more numbers to it, although it's a little less complicated. But obviously, everybody in the audience is very aware of the trek of California and CARB, and how your state continues to lead the construction of strategies and regulations to try and reduce emissions, not just GHGs, but also nitrogen oxides and particulate matter as well. Just looking in the near future here, let's look at 2024, where we have these new low NOx regulations. So 75% reduction from today's levels expected in just 3 years from now, and then another 50% reduction in the particulate matter levels. And in addition to this, just 3 years after that, further reductions are fully expected, and all of this exceeds what's going on in the EPA. So great leadership shown here. And then combine this with the stuff that the Biden administration is saying, talking about decarbonization and cleaning the electric grid, all by the midpoint of this century, again, as Dave alluded to. And so all of this kind of paints a picture of where this is headed. So this should be really no surprise to everybody. And I think it's great that we have these folks on the line here learning more about this and how they go about learning, planning, and eventually procuring and operating. So I'll put this a little bit more into graphical form here. This image to the left makes it very clear what a 75% reduction looks like in NOx and PM reductions. And then the graph over here shows just how much, how responsible our industry is. So the biggest minority slice of this pie comes from on-road heavy-duty vehicles. So that's us. So it really shows that we as the manufacturer and you as the operator, we have that responsibility to make these reductions and realize these new regulations. So we really are in the driver's seat here, no pun intended. So just going through the technology a little bit more, and MCI is no stranger to adopting low emission technology. So we've been doing clean diesel for a very long time, always to keep up with the ever-changing CARB regulations. It's the easiest thing to do. It still is dirty at the end of the day, but there have been huge improvements in efficiencies over the past, several decades. It's gotten better and better. Of course, there's going to be limitations to how much you can make an internal combustion engine clean. You're still burning fossil fuels at the end of the day. It's all about doing it as little as you possibly can. There's CNG as an option, and again, we've been pioneers in this area as well, a little bit more complicated. And then there are hybrid diesel electric drivetrains that we can adopt, but that doesn't really help you too much in highway situations, which no doubt many of you operate in a lot. If you're in stop and go applications, fantastic. And that's why it's so popular in transit buses. Doesn't quite cut it too much for the motor coach industry though. So that's low emission vehicles technology. Now here's zero emission, the big fish, battery electric and fuel cell. And Chris, you were making some comments about the sticker shock that you get from buying battery electric versus diesel. It's about twice as much. So you're looking at like $1 million per vehicle. Don't let that scare you too much, because let's not forget that you need to kind of take the longer view in this. And you have to think about things like maintenance and fueling costs, which sort of amortize over the entire lifetime of the vehicle. So you have to think about it in terms of total cost of ownership. As we're getting into vehicles, we're starting to get into battery electric vehicles, we're starting to get more of that data pour in. In general, you can expect 50% less maintenance costs, and your fueling cost savings totally depends on the price of diesel, the price of electricity, and what you can agree upon with your utility. The more you drive it, the more you save. So you really have to take the long view with that. And then other things that came up during the discussion previously were, range and refueling time. These can kind of be quelled by the use of a fuel cell technology. Now, I'm only going to be talking about battery electric coaches here, but fuel cell does relieve some of the problems that we have with that. Again, it's an even higher capital cost. The operating expenses for fueling are going to be a little bit more, but really you can operate a fuel cell coach much like a diesel. You get the range, you can probably get a little bit of your baggage space back, and you can stay zero emissions, which is the most important part. Because basically what you do is you have a battery electric coach, but you also have an onboard fuel cell that's constantly recharging the coach. And if you source a green source of hydrogen, and as that supply chain becomes cleaner, and we think of the entire life cycle of it, and more infrastructure becomes available, this might be the long-term solution for the entire motor coach sector. So really interesting stuff coming down the pipeline, and lots of different ways of approaching this. So a little bit more about our group of companies. MCI is part of the NFI group. So really, it's not just coaches. We have tons of different technology to leverage by our sister companies. So we build everything from low floor cutaways for the shuttle sector, as well as medium duty buses, heavy duty transit buses with New Flyer, coaches with MCI, and then we've also more recently acquired Alexander Dennis, which builds double deckers. So really, when it comes down to moving lots of people in a heavy duty type atmosphere, we're kind of an all-in-one sort of go-to. And it's our plans to clean all of these up over time. So just focusing a little bit more on MCI, we are a Winnipeg company. As I mentioned, I am located in Winnipeg. We've been around for almost 90 years now, have a huge American presence, and we are the largest coach manufacturer in North America. So when you take that together with those the technologies that I showed, how do you electrify a motor coach, and how do you electrify this industry, and what are the challenges that are involved? And I think a lot of them have already been covered. It has to do with recharge times and available infrastructure, as well as range. Range is extremely important in your industry. With that said, there are some low-hanging fruit that we can tackle, and that's sort of the market that we've tried to corner. Things like in the private sector, there's going to be the employee shuttle. So we're talking the Bay Area here, where we have all these big tech companies. They operate within a city limit, or within a metro region, I should say. So that's a good private sector example of shorter distances that are required, but still needing a highway faring coach. Same deal in the public sector with transit agencies that offer commuter type services, all within a metro region. So you're not going, city to city or across the state or even across the country. It's low hanging fruit for now, but as the technology gets better, we're going to get better battery technology over time, and we're going to have more infrastructure available to use. And so eventually we'll be able to expand the sphere of applications that we can tackle with the technology that exists today. All that said, MCI has been designing, building, testing, and implementing battery electric vehicles for a couple of years now. And a big thanks of that, or part of that credit goes to the fact that we are part of that NFI group. So we get to leverage all that great technology from our sister company, New Flyer. A little bit more about New Flyers. Again, they are the transit bus manufacturer within our group. They are also a Winnipeg company, and they've also been around for 90 years. So they're just kind of across town. Yeah, they are the largest transit bus manufacturer in North America. And I'm not going to go through every item here, but they have a pretty impressive resume with regards to adoption of low and zero technologies. So everything from a trolley bus, they've also done CNG. They were the first to fuel cells, hybrids, battery electric, you name it. So they have lots of proven technology available, and being part of the same group of companies, we've been able to leverage that on our proven motor coach structure. So with that said, here they are. Here are our currently available battery electric models geared towards our private sector. We have our J4500 Charge. And then for the public sector, we have our D series. This is our CRT LE. The LE stands for low entry. So we actually have a vestibule on board that makes it easier for passengers with mobility issues to enter and exit. So it's not just about electrification, it's about accessibility as well. So we've tackled that. And then coming soon in just a couple of years, we're going to have an all high floor version of that coach for the public sector as well. So we're really trying to corner as much of that market as we can. All right, so I'm a technology guy, so I really want to talk about technology and what kind of work goes into electrifying a motor coach. So I'll show you this massive diagram here. I'm not going to go through every part of it, but I think that it's really cool to be able to show off sort of the feat that we have. Again, we have this proven coach structure that we've been developing for 90 years. Our plan wasn't to reinvent the wheel and just start from scratch and do a purpose-built type of item. We wanted that proven coach structure, and so we've leveraged the spaces that were left as soon as you remove the diesel drivetrain. So we have power electronics, batteries, accessories, thermal management systems, everything placed strategically within the rear compartment where we would normally have the engine, as well as plenty within space where we'd normally have baggage space. And so definitely concerns are heard regarding the loss of baggage space. However, in our J4500 platform, we do still have some, about a third of what we'd normally have. It's definitely a balance between electrification and having some available space. So unfortunately, and we hope that that's remedied over time by better technology. One example I always like to point out is, we actually designed a battery pack, a huge, massive battery pack that's the exact shape of a fuel tank, and we put it in the fuel tank compartment. So it's some really cool engineering that's going on, and of course we have our electric accessories like an electric HVAC compressor, the traction motor, of course, air system is all electrified. And what's great about this is that because it's not belt driven, they have their own independent motors, and so they can operate idly without having the engine running, because there is no engine. Another really cool chart. Again, I'm not going to go through every little part of it, but I think that when these slides are shared with you, you might want to take a really close look at this. This is just showing the energy flow from everywhere, from the power line all the way to the endpoints of use. And so we have infrastructure that transforms the energy as necessary to get it to the charger system. We charge our battery system, and then we have a series of inverters and converters that step up and step down the voltage and power level to a usable level to operate things like the traction motor and all of our different accessories, including our low voltage system as well. So really cool energy flow diagram here. Batteries, this is actually my area of expertise, so I could talk about this all day, but I've tried to condense it as much as I can. We source our batteries currently from a company called Exalt Energy. You may or may not have heard of them, but they build all American made batteries. And the reason why you probably haven't heard about them is because they're not building batteries for your cell phone or for your laptop or anything like that. These are for heavy duty applications. So these batteries themselves are actually very purpose built for us. They adopt NMC type chemistry that stands for nickel, manganese, cobalt. There were a couple of comments earlier that were talking about the need for fast charging as well as high range. It's a little bit more complicated than that, because you usually have to play a little bit of a game of trade-offs in terms of the abilities of your battery. So if you have something that's very energy dense, you usually lose the ability to accept high amounts of power for charging. So what's nice about NMC is it actually gives us a really nice mix of both of those things, along with lifetime. That's obviously important in your TCO arguments, performance, etc. It's a really nice balance chemistry for these types of applications that'll be used for a motor coach. As well, we really take seriously our thermal management. What's really interesting about the batteries that we use is that they have these patented thermal flow plates that actually allow coolant to be pumped and face every part of the cell. So that means that there's not going to be cell failure at any particular part and take the entire thing out of commission. It's going to be able to control the temperature of each part of the cell, allowing us to maximize its lifetime. The temperature of batteries is the #1 determinant for how long they last and how well they perform. And so that's why we take it so seriously and have our a patented battery thermal management system in place to either cool down or also heat up the batteries in cold weather and keep them happy. Taking it a step further, building them into packs. And so we have the cells themselves, and we add the balance of plant. So we add the thermal flow plates, we add a battery management system and sensors and everything like that. So it becomes sort of a living, breathing organism that's constantly self-aware, having the battery health monitored, having the temperature monitored, having voltage measured. Everything comes back to a central computer that acts as like a central brain for managing the batteries. And so what we come up with here are these building block sub packs that almost act like Lego blocks and are extremely modular to be placed on the bus as needed. And then finally, up at the high end of the hierarchy are the actual packs themselves. And so this is the integration of those sub packs that I showed. And this is really where MCI steps in and uses our 90 years of engineering to make this possible, putting them into packs that fit within our proven coach structure, using stainless steel so we get good strength to weight, lower possibility of corrosion. We also include things like drainage, and valves and things like that. So we really have a plug and play system here that we can string together in parallel and get the energy level up to a usable amount of kilowatt hours to extend our range. Speaking of, everyone always asks, what kind of range do we actually get from batteries? And we always need to give this disclaimer at first that it depends, and that's not really a fun answer, but I think it is really important to understand the determinants of range, things like the amount of HVAC use, since you don't get free heat from the engine anymore, the number of passengers that you have, how hilly is the topography that you're operating on. All of these will give you a pretty wide range of ranges, and I'm going to show you some numbers that show that. But in general, one take-home number, and anybody who's new to the industry might want to get familiar with the idea of using kilowatt hours per mile. It's a lot like MPG, and this gives us an idea of the efficiency or the consumption of the vehicle and how much energy it uses to travel a mile. And we like to stick around in this 2 kilowatt hour per mile area. So like I said, here's some examples. I don't want to overwhelm you with numbers or anything like that, but try and pay attention to this bottom row over here. This is for our J4500 with our max battery capacity of 544 kilowatt hours. And you can see that the range that we get, I like to call it the range of ranges, because you get such a wide window, is anywhere from only 163 miles up to about 233 miles, which is pretty respectable. But all of this comes down to those factors. And so in a heavy duty type application, for example, you'll have things like the HVAC pumping in full, you'll have a full load full of people, and you might be doing a lot of hill climbing as well, maybe all hill all one way, and then the reverse trip is a lot better because you have regenerative braking going down. But this is just to give you an idea of the types of ranges that we can achieve and how dependent it is on different factors.
Michael, it's Vicki. I don't know if you have seen this, but Ginny Orr has a question. She says, what's the average climate temperature which these batteries have been tested in for in-coach use? Could you address that?
Oh yeah, no, absolutely. That's a really good question. We've been in Southern California, and we've been throughout Northern Alberta and Canada. So we have a very wide range of temperatures. I think that it's been operating in as low as in the minus 30s, and it's been operating, at or around 100 degrees Fahrenheit. So very, very wide range. And a lot of that comes down to that battery thermal management system that I was talking about. Again, no matter what the temperature is like outside, we're always keeping the batteries happy with that system, because if it's really, really hot out, we'll cool down the coolant, we'll pump that into the batteries, we'll keep them cooler, and we'll keep them within that optimum temperature range of around 25 degrees Celsius. So about room temperature, high 60s sort of area. So it's a very wide range of operating environments. Great. So how do we get that sort of data on range? Now, I want to talk about this really cool onboard technology that actually makes the vehicle really smart. This is technology that we've adopted from New Flyer, who's implemented it on their transit buses. And this is especially important for fleets. Now, you're probably familiar with telematics to be used in your fleets to sort of monitor where everybody is and stuff like that. But we take it to the next level with our MCI Connect system. Here, you can actually see where power consumption is happening. So in a report that you can generate after a trip, you can get like a pie chart like this that'll show that, X amount of your battery consumption went to the traction motor for propulsion, X went to an electric heater, a certain amount went to the air system. And you can actually map this out. And if you become a very data-driven fleet and pay good attention to it, this is your avenue to making, a lot of efficiency savings, which is going to save you money down the road and let you operate a more efficient fleet. So really, really important stuff as it relates to electric vehicles, where you do care about where your energy is going. So let's switch gears a little bit, and I'll kind of take the last third or so to talk about how do you charge these things and what do you do when you need a lot of chargers. So first of all, our general approach to charging an electric coach is just a simple plug-in, or as it's often known in the industry, a depot style charger, where you have a depot base where you have these chargers installed. They have this special plug on it. We have the special outlet right on our coach, and you plug it in. This is a DC direct current fast charger. The plug type is called CCS1, and that's because it is included with this interoperability standard we follow called J1772. This means that this isn't a charger that's designed just to operate MCI coaches or anything like that. What we've done is we've been at the table with plenty of other competitors, and we've all sort of sat down and came up with a standard and said, hey, if we're going to brand ourselves J1772. We're going to be charger agnostic, and may the best manufacturer of both charger and vehicle win. And so this is sort of the industry playing ball in the name of getting electric coach adoption to come up there, because we just have to follow a standard, and you can plug into various chargers that are manufactured by different companies, but all follow that same standard. And same goes for the coach side. Our coaches charge at a max rate of 150 kilowatts with our 200 amp electrical architecture, which means that we can take that hefty 544 kilowatt hour system and charge it to full from basically zero in under 4 hours. This, of course, is going to depend on how many batteries you have on it. Again, 544 is considered a lot, and we're still under that 4 hour mark. One feature that we do like to tout is that this depot charging, sort of slower charging approach is really good for the batteries, because it keeps them at, again, their happy and healthy temperature. You're not forcing amperage through them, very quickly, like you might if you have a fast charge type of system. So this is going to make your battery system last as long as possible, which is important for cost. So now what do you do at the fleet level? So the New Flyer experience in the transit bus area, they spent so much time developing their electric bus, and there was so much interest from transit agencies that these agencies would say, hey, you know what, we really love your bus, but we want a turnkey system. We don't want to have to source out our own chargers and figure out where they plug in and how that's going to work and redesign our garage or anything like that. And so this sort of forced New Flyer to come up with a full suite solution called New Flyer Infrastructure Solutions. It was introduced just over 2 years ago at the beginning of 2019, and this is, again, a full suite service for start to finish of projects. It handles everything but the bus, and it's all about the chargers. It's all about the work that needs to be done to make your site ready for electrification. And MCI, part of the New Flyer group, means that because we're friends, we get to utilize this service and leverage that expertise. So for them, it all starts with knowing the right questions to ask. You as the operator, you're going to have plenty of questions like, how many chargers do I need? Where do they go? What do I need to do with my utility? They know these exact questions and how to go about answering them. And so that's really what you're getting, at least to begin with. It includes every part or every stakeholder that you can imagine. It's not just about the chargers themselves. Certainly they're going to be interfacing with those suppliers, but it's also going to be with your existing facilities and imagining what your facilities might look like by using their architecture and engineering team, working, of course, with the operators themselves, and as well as with the utilities. And they know the right questions to ask to your utility to get the right amount of power and the power at a competitive price as well. So sort of going through these in a little bit more detail. So this will include master planning of your facility, whether you need to have something purpose-built or retrofit your existing one. We have access to energy management software so that you're charging at off-peak times as much as possible to reduce your charge. Actually procuring all of your chargers themselves and handling the construction and project management of the entire thing. We have experts who are working for New Flyer, a bus manufacturer, who are experts in construction. So we really put together a really unique team of folks. So yeah, again, everything civil, any of the electrical make-ready work, and then of course the actual charger installation at the end, commissioning, starting you up, getting you ready to operate your first ZEB fleet, and then even on the back end here with a warranty and backing it up with parts and service support as well. So it really is a full suite service that we can leverage. I wanted to show you this really cool slide here. This is just an example, sort of a case study of just a site visit that we did with Houston Metro. I was lucky enough to be a part of the team that went there, although I don't think I helped out too much. And what I wanted to illustrate to you is that this is just after a couple hours of walking around their site, and this is what the folks who are part of that team are able to imagine. Really creative bunch here, but they'll actually see the available facility that you have, the available space, and imagine and render what that might look like with the right amount of chargers for the procurement that they're imagining. So really, really cool. This is just a preliminary report. They obviously get into a lot more detail as you go further with them. You don't need to do the full start to finish to commissioning type of contracting to them. You can do bits and pieces. You can fill it out as needed, and they can fill in the remainder. So it's it's extremely modular type of program that they put out. And then finally here, I'll end off with showing all the different areas where they're operating. And this map is probably out of date, but this shows all the ZEB deployments and the associated infrastructure work that's been done. So again, real expertise. This isn't, even though this is a newer program, there's plenty of experience that we have doing this. We think of battery electric technology as being extremely new, and it is, but it doesn't mean that we don't have lots of experience in the field. And so we really want to tout that. And so finally, here's some contact information. Please feel free to reach out to any of us here. We have Brent Maitland's, our VP of private sector sales. Please feel free to contact him. If you're mostly interested in the infrastructure, Pat Jones is the guy at New Flyer Infrastructure Solutions. And this is my contact info. If you just want to talk tech, please call me up or email me anytime. And I'll end here with a plug to our Vehicle Innovation Center mini series that we're holding next month. We have 4 parts here. We're going to talk about next generation battery technology as it's implemented on our transit bus, the Excelsior Charge. We're going to talk fuel cell technology infrastructure on June 9th, and then our NF/MCI Connect telematics system that I was touching on June 15th. So please check out our website, sign up. Happy to interact with you folks in the future, and I'm looking to forward to a great discussion. So thanks so much again for having me, and happy Earth Day.
Man, Michael, that's exciting stuff. That's awesome. Gosh, that was first time I've seen that presentation. That's pretty good stuff. I have some questions though that came in, and if you could answer them, it'd be great.
Yeah.
First one is from Jenny Orr on the regenerative braking. Does this mean there is no longer an exhaust brake? She uses this more than the service brake whenever possible. Can you give some insight into that?
Yeah, no, that's a really good question. In our first rendition of the coach, we didn't have it. We just had like a base level of regenerative braking, and it was fine. We recaptured energy, and that was great. When we started doing testing with it, we realized how much energy we were leaving on the table, and we actually did add a paddle in there to adjust the levels of regenerative braking. So if you're in a lot of stop-go traffic, crank it up to level 5, and you'll get that harder, more intense regenerative braking, and you'll notice it in your telematics how much energy you're saving. So we do have an equivalent now. Yeah.
So it's a you can turn it up and down depending on how much you want to do it.
Yeah, it's a lot like an engine brake.
Like a Jake brake. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, more like a transmission brake. It's right in the left-hand console. There's 5 settings. It's very user-friendly.
But is it smooth for passengers?
Yes.
Okay, because I don't want to be jerking them.
No.
The people that have driven our electric coaches, if you haven't had a chance, I mean, we have demos running around, but they generally feel like a diesel coach. That was sort of by design. There's not a big difference getting in behind the driver's seat of an electric vehicle from a diesel. They feel and react very similar.
Just a few $100,000.
For now, it is, we had a slide in there earlier about, just look at cars, how the initial zero emission vehicles, how expensive they were and what the range was. They're coming down pretty quickly. So it is just a matter of time before it sort of levels out.
Yeah, I'm just not sure I would be able to market that. I have an electric vehicle. Please book with me because I have to pay the bill.
Exactly.
I hear you though.
Day by day, every day is getting better. I have some questions for you, Michael.
Yeah.
What is MCI seeing on their range of longevity for the batteries in a vehicle? How long would an operator expect those batteries to last for them?
Yeah, no, that's another great question. Again, it does come down to the use case. Obviously, like any other vehicle, the more you use it, the quicker you're going to notice degradation. I think that one myth that's out there that a lot of people don't understand is that it's not that, batteries just die one day, that they just, it's like, oh, they're horrible, throw them out. I almost wish that it was like that, because then you wouldn't have to experience any linear degradation or anything like that. But that is generally what happens with batteries. Is eventually, you're going to start losing range slowly but steadily. You won't notice it on a daily basis. You might notice it on a yearly basis. And again, that all comes down to your particular use. So it could be anywhere from less than 1% in a year, and that's again with heavy use, to around 2%. So I think that when the point where you have to replace it, a lot of it comes down to how much range tolerance do you have when you buy it. Let's let's say, just for hypothetically, that you only need it to run 100 miles, and we give you a coach that we guarantee the range will be 100 miles. Well, that's great in year one, but in year two, suddenly you can't even meet your most basic application, and it's useless. So and then another hypothetical situation, let's say we have that same 100-mile range coach, and but your application, you only need 70 miles. Well, you have a long tolerance to the point where you need to replace it. So really, in the industry, we usually say that, okay, well, we'll do a replacement at around 70%, or sorry, 30% degradation, so to 70% of its original capacity. But really, if you're a private operator and it's 70%, you're still able to do everything you want to do with it. Why would you want to spend more to do a replacement? So it really is a case-by-case basis with it. But in general, some of the projections that we've had to do for operating in a transit environment could be anywhere between 6 to 12 years before a replacement would be needed.
So 1-2% degradation based on how many hours do you think of usage?
I can't remember what that particular number was based off of, but I think that we got some particular or very specific numbers from a transit agency. I can't remember off the top of my head exactly what they were. That's quite a bit of a different application, though.
Okay.
So I would imagine that it would be a better picture for a private coach operator versus transit bus, where it's a lot more heavy duty in terms of its.
Yeah, so I used to race RC cars with my kids. They were 10 and 12, and they had lithium polymer batteries, LiPo batteries, and we used to just charge them to the max, discharge them, charge them again, heat them up as fast as you can, throw them in the car, and then go out and race them. So we saw degradation pretty quick, after a month or two of that battery. So
oh yeah,
that's why electrification is so interesting, because I mean, with the degradation and charging of batteries and how long are they going to last, it's interesting.
Well, I can't overstate the importance enough of that battery management system. I said it a few times during the talk, and I'm looking at my cell phone on the side here charging right now, and it doesn't have a battery thermal management system. You can't fit it inside, and so you're kind of it's very easy to see in your cell phone when you buy a brand new iPhone or Android or whatever you buy. It's pretty amazing how awesome it is for the first couple of weeks, and then next thing you know, you're charging it 3 times a day after a couple years. But that's not the case with us. It can't be the case in an industry where batteries are so expensive. It's half the cost of the vehicle. Like if it's if the coach is an electric coach is twice as much as a conventional vehicle, it's literally just because of the battery cost.
Wow.
There's been tremendous gains for batteries for personal electronics because there's so much volume. But as I was saying, we have these specialized batteries that have been developed for the heavy duty sector. We don't quite have those economies of scale yet. It'll come, but that's the reason why it's so expensive and why we have to take very good care of it.
Where do you see battery range going? I mean, you're currently at 160 to 230. Where do you see the next 5 years going for operators on the range and the technology there?
Initially, it'll be pretty incremental. So, manufacturers will they'll release to us, a different generation of a battery. It'll usually go up anywhere between 10 and 15%. So you'll see that sort of gain every 2 to 3 years probably.
Okay.
What's going to change a lot is when we can get to some of that breakthrough technology. There's been a lot of hype. There's been lots of hype around things like solid state batteries, and there is really cool technology that's in the works. It's a little bit unclear exactly how close they are to commercialization, to the point where we're not just reading science articles about them, but we can actually buy them and they're safe. I don't think that we're quite there yet. There have been some implementations with some, I would call it some early examples, but they've been failures in the field. It takes a lot to commercialize breakthrough tech, and it's going to be breakthrough tech though that actually gets us a 50% range increase, and then suddenly we're on a far more level playing field, and adoption is going to go through the roof. There is a little bit of a waiting game here. I'm kind of thinking that it's 2021 now. I would think that seeing a breakthrough tech would be somewhere between 2025 and 2030. Hope it happens sooner. I hope I'm totally wrong.
Yeah, we do too.
There's a couple things happening right now, right? There's the technology improvement like Michael described, but there's also packaging improvements.
Mhm.
So they're getting more efficient. They're also getting smaller, which means we can package them more efficiently to get more of them on the vehicle. So every little nook and cranny we can find to put components and leave baggage space, we're also trying to do that as part of the development. So even in a couple of years, you'll see on a J coach, instead of 544 kilowatts, we'll be in the 600s, just because the batteries are smaller and they're more efficient. And a fun fact, Chris, the batteries we use right now are actually the batteries they use on the Formula E series. So that if you see those Formula E cars
Oh, yeah, yeah.
around, that's all Exalt batteries.
Yeah.
Wow.
I have another question, if I may. So basically, it sounds to me like these vehicles aren't going to wear out. The batteries are going to wear out. So can you repower? Like we would change an engine, could we not put in the more updated battery without having to go out and buy a whole new coach again?
Oh, absolutely
Question.
you can. I think that's what Chris was getting at, is at one point you have to replace the batteries. The coach,
Well, but if the
you know, chat-
technology and the size has changed, how will you put that into the new technology? Will that fit into the existing coach, or would you have to redo the whole thing?
Well, it kind of depends. So right now, I guess in the shorter term, the way that our suppliers communicated to us is what they want to do is they want to have a consistent form factor, and then just basically replace the chemistry on board and make the chemistry that much better, but still have the form factor the exact same. So theoretically, we are planning to still, you know, package the exact same way, or I should say in the same form factor, so that, you know, we could do a 1-for-1 replacement. Everything looks the same, but what's under the hood, or in the battery packaging, I should say, is considerably different, and that's where you see your range increase. And so if you do a replacement in, you know, in 5 or 10 years, and that form factor stays the same, like we're planning it to be, then yes, the simple answer is you can do a battery swap and take advantage of newer technology.
Well, I guess what I'm wondering then, if you're talking about trying to increase our baggage capacity, and I'm not as educated as you with all of this, so when you're talking form factor, I'm assuming you're saying same size, same space. So if my battery is taking up the same space, how am I ever going to get more baggage space with the newer technology? I'm going to have to go buy a new bus.
Okay, yeah. Another way of looking at it too is, okay, so let's say, you know, we can leverage a battery that has 20% more more energy density. Well, I showed you that slide over there that shows us how, you know, we have these different packs and they're modular, and then we just add as much as we possibly can. If we get a 20% increase, then we could probably, for the same range, remove one pack entirely in the baggage space. So you get baggage space, you wouldn't see an increase in range, but you also wouldn't see a decrease. So that's one example of what we can do, is just put less packs on board.
Okay, thank you.
Cool.
Do we have any more questions out there? Well, I think that's all the questions we have, Michael.
Great.
So kind of conclude the meeting. I really want to thank David Kassenbaum for his presentation. I want to thank MCI Michael and Brent for the sponsorship of today's event, and a great presentation on the future of electrification and what you guys currently have and what's moving forward. Vicki, is there anything that you'd like to conclude for the meeting?
Yeah, I just want to say thank you, Chris, for hosting this, and Jody for joining as well to talk about her part of it. And I'd like to just remind everybody, please plan to attend our annual meeting and trade show in October. Our registration opens June 1st. We have a great program set for you. You'll see the agenda go up on the website starting tomorrow. And the dates are October 24th to 26th in Henderson, Nevada. We're ready to get back to business, and we hope you come and join us. So yeah, thank you. That's really it for me. Thank you, Chris.
Well, thank you, everybody. You guys have a great Earth Day, and until next time, see you on the road.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye, everybody.